Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're plunging into the misty, mysterious world of horror literature. And, to navigate this creepy landscape, we need a guide, someone who knows where the skeletons are buried, so to speak.
And who better to lead us through the shadows than the master of the macabre himself, H.P. Lovecraft?
Lovecraft, yeah. I mean, the name itself sends chills down your spine. But we're not just talking about his stories today, are we?
No, we're going deeper this time. We're using Lovecraft's essay, Supernatural Horror in Literature, as our map. It's like a behind-the-scenes look at how fear itself works, written by a guy who practically invented a whole new way to scare us.
So we're getting the inside scoop on fear, straight from a horror legend. Okay, I'm hooked already.
Well, Lovecraft believed that fear, especially fear of the unknown, is about as primal as it gets. It's in our DNA, passed down from our ancestors who huddled around flickering fires, telling stories about the things that lurked in the darkness.
Right, like those ancient myths and folklore, the ones that still give us goosebumps today. Those stories must tap into something deep within us,
Yeah.
some primal instinct that never really goes away.
Exactly. It's like a collective shiver that runs down the spine of humanity. And, for centuries, those stories were shared through word of mouth, around campfires, whispered in the dark. But then something happened that changed everything. The printing press.
The printing press. Like Gutenberg and all that. What does that have to do with horror stories?
Oh, it changed the game completely. Imagine suddenly you could mass produce these chilling tales. And that's when the Gothic literature craze exploded onto the scene in the 18th century.
Gothic literature, huh? That's all about spooky castles and creepy portraits, right? Like the kind of stuff that makes you want to sleep with the lights on.
That's part of it, for sure. Think crumbling castles with secret passages, each one whispering tales of sinister deeds from the past. And those portraits, the ones where the eyes seem to follow you around the room.
Okay, now you're just messing with me. But I get it. It's all about atmosphere. Creating a sense of unease, like you're never quite sure what's lurking just around the corner.
Precisely. And let's not forget the characters. You've got your brooding, tyrannical villains, your innocent heroines caught in their webs, and those family secrets. Oh, those stolen inheritances and hidden identities. It's a recipe for delicious drama, with a side of impending doom.
So you're saying there's a whole lot more to Gothic horror than just things that go bump in the night.
Absolutely. It thrives on suspense, on dread. It's the things left unsaid, the shadows lurking at the edge of your vision that truly make you shiver.
It's like when you're a kid and someone tells you a scary story, but they leave the ending open-ended, so you're left to imagine what happens next.
Exactly. And this is where the pioneers of Gothic horror come in. Horace Walpole, Anne Radcliffe, Matthew Lewis. Their names might not be as familiar as, say, Dracula, but trust me, they laid the groundwork for everything that came after.
Walpole's The Castle of Otranto, for example. I've heard it's considered the granddaddy of them all, even if it is a bit rough around the edges.
Well, it's like the first Frankenstein monster. Maybe not the most elegant creature, but definitely groundbreaking. And then you have Anne Radcliffe, the queen of atmosphere.
Radcliffe. Her books are like Gothic cathedrals, all gloomy and atmospheric and full of creepy shadows. But I heard she has a thing for explaining away the supernatural at the last minute.
She does tend to offer rational explanations for her spooky events. Some readers found it frustrating, like, wait, so there wasn't actually a ghost? But others admired her skill at building suspense.
It's like she leads you down this dark, winding path, and then, it's just the wind rattling the shutters. I can see how that would be a letdown for some people.
Oh, definitely. But then you have Matthew Lewis, who cranked the horror up to 11 with The Monk. We're talking demonic pacts, gruesome scenes, the whole unholy shebang. He pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable.
Okay, I'm sensing a theme here. It seems like horror is often at its most effective when it's pushing those boundaries, challenging our comfort zones. But why do you think the Gothic genre, in particular, resonated so strongly with readers back then? What was it about those crumbling castles and hidden secrets that captured their imaginations?
Well, imagine yourself back then. It's the 18th century, a time of immense change and upheaval. The Enlightenment was challenging traditional beliefs. The Industrial Revolution was transforming society at a dizzying pace.
It's like they were standing on the edge of a whole new world, and they weren't quite sure what to make of it. Kind of like how we feel today, with all the technology and uncertainty swirling around us.
Exactly. And within that context, the Gothic, with its eerie atmosphere and exploration of the darker side of human nature, offered a way to process those anxieties.
It's like on one hand, you have reason and progress, but on the other hand, there's this nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, we're unleashing forces we can't control. And those Gothic stories gave people a safe space to confront those fears.
Precisely. It's a way of saying, hey, we're all a little afraid of the dark. Let's explore that darkness together in the safety of fiction. It's like they stepped out of those haunted houses and realized the whole world was a bit of a haunted house, full of shadows and whispers.
And I guess as science advanced and the world seemed to get bigger, those shadows probably grew even larger. Like what was once attributed to ghosts and goblins might now be seen as the vast unknown reaches of the universe, right?
Precisely. The fear shifted from the things that go bump in the night to the things we couldn't even comprehend. The cosmic dread, you might call it. Charles the Matern, he really tapped into that with Melmoth the Wanderer.
Oh yeah, Melmoth the Wanderer, that's a classic. A cursed soul doomed to wander the earth. It's heavy stuff.
It's about guilt, despair, this crushing weight of fate, and readers, they ate it up. It's like it spoke to some deep-seated anxiety about the human condition. Then you have William Beckford and his wild ride of a book, Vathek. Have you ever read that one?
Vasek, it's on my list. It's the one with the crazy palace and the descent into hell.
Right. That's the one. Inspired by Eastern mythology, full of dark magic and ambition, it's like Beckford took the Gothic formula and injected it with a shot of Eastern mysticism, creating this whole new flavor of fear.
It's amazing how horror can borrow from different cultures and traditions, creating something new and terrifying in the process. But what about American horror? Did it have its own distinct flavor?
Oh, absolutely. American horror, it's a different beast altogether. Haunted by puritanical guilt, the vast wilderness, this constant tension between progress and the past, you can practically feel it in the air.
It's like the American landscape itself is steeped in a kind of primal fear, right? From the Salem witch trials to the horrors of slavery and beyond, there's this undercurrent of darkness running through American history.
And that darkness found its voice in the works of two literary giants, Edgar Allan Poe and Nathaniel Hawthorne.
Poe, the master of psychological horror. I mean, the guy could craft a sentence that would make your blood run cold. The Telltale Heart, The Fall of the House of Usher.
Oh.
He just had this way of getting under your skin.
Poe understood that true terror comes from within. It's the fear of madness, of losing control, of the darkness that lurks in our own hearts. The Black Cat, for example, it's about this descent into madness fueled by guilt and paranoia.
And Ligeia. Don't even get me started on Ligeia.
Yes.
Talk about a story that messes with your mind.
Poe, he wasn't afraid to explore the strange, the morbid, the downright bizarre, and he did it with such a masterful command of language, this sense of atmosphere that's almost suffocating at times.
It's like he's painting these vivid pictures with words, these macabre landscapes that you can practically step into. And then there's Hawthorne, The House of the Seven Gables, with its ancestral curse and the weight of the past bearing down on the present. It's just brilliant.
Hawthorne, he was a master of atmosphere too, but he also had this fascination with the darker side of American history, particularly the Puritan past. His stories are full of guilt, sin, and the idea that the past is never truly gone.
It's like he's saying that we're all haunted by the sins of our fathers, whether we realize it or not. Okay, so we've got Poe, the master of psychological horror, and Hawthorne, the chronicler of America's haunted past. How would you say their approaches to horror differed? What makes each one so uniquely terrifying?
Well, Poe, he hits you right between the eyes. His horror is visceral, immediate. He puts you right there in the mind of a madman, and you experience the world through their distorted senses. Hawthorne, on the other hand, he's more like a slow burn.
Yeah, Poe shocks, Hawthorne simmers.
Exactly. Hawthorne's horror is more atmospheric, more psychological. It seeps into your bones slowly like a chilling mist. And often, it's the things left unsaid, the things lurking just beneath the surface that are the most terrifying.
It's like that feeling you get when you're walking through a dark forest and you know something is watching you, but you can't quite see it. But American horror didn't end with Poe and Hawthorne, did it? They passed the torch, so to speak, to other writers who continued to explore the dark corners of the American psyche.
Oh, absolutely. Ambrose Bierce, for example, brought his own brand of darkness to the genre. Bierce, he lived through the horrors of the Civil War, and that experience left an undeniable mark on his writing.
And Occurrence Owl Creek Bridge is a perfect example. Talk about a story that stays with you long after you've finished reading it. The way Bierce plays with time and perception, blurring the lines between reality and delusion, it's masterful.
Pierce's stories often have this dreamlike quality, this sense of unreality that makes them all the more unsettling. And then, of course, we have the man who brought us cosmic horror, our very own guide for this deep dive, H.P. Lovecraft.
Lovecraft. The man who stared into the abyss and found, well, more abyss.
Lovecraft's horror, it's on a whole other level. He takes us beyond the realm of the psychological and into the vast, unknowable expanse of the cosmos.
His stories are filled with these ancient, tentacle beings, cosmic horrors that defy human comprehension. It's like he's saying that the scariest things aren't the monsters under the bed, but the monsters we can't even begin to imagine.
Lovecraft tapped into this primal fear of the unknown, the fear that we are utterly insignificant in the grand scheme of things.
It's a fear that's both humbling and terrifying at the same time. Like we're just tiny specks of dust in this vast, indifferent universe. So we've gone from the haunted houses of the Gothic to the psychological terrors of Poe and Hawthorne to the cosmic dread of Lovecraft. It's quite a journey.
It really makes you appreciate the sheer range and power of horror, doesn't it? How it can reflect our deepest fears and anxieties, whether they stem from the darkness within us or the vast unknown that lies beyond.
Speaking of different flavors of fear, we haven't even touched on British horror yet. And everyone knows that the Brits have a particular knack for crafting chilling tales. So how did British horror writers approach this evolving landscape of fear? What sets their brand of horror apart?
Ah, it's different, isn't it? British horror, it gets under your skin. It's like a whisper in a graveyard.
It's got that quiet creepiness, that sense of something ancient and unsettling lurking just beneath the surface.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about British horror that feels so distinct?
Well, for one thing, they've got a lot of history to draw on. Centuries of folklore and myth, ancient ruins, haunted battlefields, it's all there, woven into the fabric of the land.
Right. It's like the past is never truly past in Britain. It's always present, just waiting to reach out and grab you.
Exactly. And then there's the landscape itself, those rolling moors, those dark forests, those craggy coastlines. It's both beautiful and eerie, familiar yet somehow alien.
It's like a storybook setting that's been twisted just slightly,
Yeah.
like something's not quite right. So who are some of the British authors who really captured that unique brand of horror?
Well, you can't talk about British horror without mentioning Arthur Machen. He was a master of slow burn dread, of weaving these unsettling tales of ancient secrets and hidden worlds.
No, The Great God Pan. Now there's a story that gets under your skin.
Oh, absolutely. The Great God Pan, it's all about those things that lurk just beyond our perception, those ancient primal forces that we only glimpse out of the corner of our eye. And then you have Algernon Blackwood, another master of atmosphere and psychological suspense.
Blackwood. His stories are like fever dreams, all strange and unsettling and hard to shake off. The Willows is a good example of that.
So yes, the Willows, that sense of being watched, of being hunted by something ancient and malevolent. Blackwood, he could really make you feel the immensity and indifference of nature, the idea that we're just small, insignificant creatures in a vast and often uncaring world.
It's that cosmic dread again, isn't it? But with a distinctly British flavor. And then, of course, there's M.R. James, the master of the classic ghost story.
Ah, M.R. James. He understood that the most effective horror often unfolds in the most ordinary of settings. A quiet library, a dusty museum, a cozy country estate.
And then something creepy crawls out of the woodwork.
Exactly. James, he had a knack for creating these incredibly vivid and unsettling images, these grotesque and disturbing creatures that would just burrow their way into your nightmares. He knew how to get under your skin.
So we've traveled from those crumbling Gothic castles of Europe to the dark heart of America with its puritanical guilt and cosmic dread, and now to the misty shores of Britain with its ancient folklore and unsettling landscapes. What a journey.
It really makes you realize that horror, it's a global phenomenon, isn't it? It takes on different forms, different flavors, depending on where it's rooted.
But at its core, it's all about exploring those universal fears, those anxieties that keep us up at night. The fear of the unknown, the fear of death, the fear of the darkness within ourselves. And, there's something oddly comforting about that, isn't there?
Comforting. How so?
Well, it's like no matter how different our cultures may seem, no matter how much time passes, we're all united by these primal fears. It's a reminder that we're all human, all sharing this strange and wonderful and sometimes terrifying journey together.
I like that, a shared journey through the shadows. And maybe, just maybe, by facing those shadows together, by shining a light into those dark corners of our minds and hearts, we can learn to navigate them with a little more courage and a little less fear.
Well said. And who knows, maybe by exploring the world of horror, By allowing ourselves to be scared, we might even discover a strange kind of beauty in the darkness.
The beauty of fear, there's something poetic about that, don't you think?
I do. So, to all you listeners out there, as we wrap up this deep dive into the wonderfully weird world of horror literature, we encourage you to keep exploring. Pick up a book by one of the authors we've discussed, or seek out new voices that speak to your own unique fears and fascinations. Because the world of horror, it's vast and ever-evolving, and there's always something new to discover, something new to fear, and something new to learn about ourselves in the process. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.